And good morning, Music to Grieve to people. It's Andrew, and I'm back with Sharon from Grieve Freaky. Hi, Sharon.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Andrew.
Okay, so yes, it's another personal one for me, which I need to, I need to stop making this all about myself. And my phone going. I can stop. And today we're going to be talking about grief through the perspective of anniversaries and, grief anniversaries and what do you do? Because, wouldn't you know it, today is the day that my dad died 3 years ago. He had a stroke or a heart attack on the golf course. And that was in Scotland, and my wife and I were in Northern California, and it took us 2 days with the dateline to get there. And we got there on the 21st and, on the even the 20th, and we took him off support on the 21st. So it was kind of a 3-day death experience, which was grim as it was. And now it's been 3 years, and it's weird at the moment. I'm all over the shop. I mean, is that normal, Sharon?
I think that's absolutely normal, because even if we don't think we're thinking about it consciously, I think subconsciously it's like woven into our minds, and like our brain knows that day's coming, right? And so, even though you may not actually be thinking about it, purposefully, it's normal to really kind of have all kinds of feelings as the day is coming up, from, dread to anticipation to you're thinking about, for me, I go back to that very day, and then you play the whole day over and over in your head. I mean, there's all different ways to be feeling. So yes, that's very, very, very normal to have just emotions that are all over the place.
I mean, and it's another thing that opens up the whole, the unique aspects of grief, in that some people get it and some people don't. I was chatting with, somebody earlier who doesn't really get the idea of anniversary, and the anniversaries come and go, but it doesn't seem to affect them or mean anything. I'm sure it does mean something, but, the idea that you might, be unsettled by it. I guess I was like that. I used to be, but now as I go through it myself, I'm like, well, there is something to this, because, it's just been a shit time.
Yeah, I think everybody, again, as we've said before, everybody's grief is unique and individual. So when those, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries come up, I think everybody will deal with them differently. A lot of it has to do with the intensity of the relationship that you had with the loss. And so, when there is somebody that, parent, whoever it is, and even an animal, if the intensity of that love was so great, the intensity of the grief and how you face those anniversaries, will be dependent upon that.
So do you have some tips for, how you can maybe alleviate some of this, or some of, the dread or the feeling, or be just,
Yeah, I think the best advice to start with is just to be honest about how you're doing. There's no preconceived or correct ways of facing these days. You have to do it with the emotions and the feelings that you're experiencing. I think that's the most important, in being honest about them. So if it's a crappy day and you're feeling down, you're not going to force yourself to go for a marathon run if that's going to make you feel worse. You're going to respect, you may want to go back to bed and pull the covers over your head. I mean, that's okay if that's how you're feeling for that day. I think when we try to fight it and push our way through it, it actually makes it more difficult. So respecting how you're feeling, and, that self-love and self-care is so important. I think the other thing is to make sure that you're surrounded by people who get what you're going through. Sometimes we tend to be around people who may say, well, I don't know why you're feeling that way. You should be over it by now. I mean, it's just another day, and all of those kinds of things. But if you're really feeling something inside of you, I mean, sometimes those aren't the right people to be around, because then you start to second guess yourself. So making sure that your extended support network, is really being supportive. I mean, I had a client who actually had a party, and everybody, for his wife, he loved her. I mean, a love story beyond the ages, and he loved her so much. And on her anniversary, he wanted to have a party, and it had only been a year, and everybody thought, oh my God, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? And it's like, he wanted to do it for him. And I so respected that. And he had it anyway. And the people that showed up were the right people to be there. So being honest, with yourself, and making sure that you surround yourself, with people who are going to support whatever it is that you decide to do, I think is very important.
It's one of the things I've been thinking about is the whole, the social media, the internet, and if you don't have a support network, if you don't have people around you, you don't have family or friends that are in that proximity, the internet, particularly for the grief world, seems to be a really great place.
Absolutely.
And I think, sure, there's, Twitter's very interesting, but Instagram seems to be an amazing place for people to connect over grief. I mean, what's your experience of that been like?
It's funny because my little network of people that I gravitate to has been really created on Instagram. I mean, at least from a business perspective, because there's so many grieving people out there, and people seem to be able to pour their heart out a little bit more on Instagram. Maybe that's because not all your friends and family can see, Facebook, and I'm not knocking Facebook, but it's just a different platform. And I think if you respond to anything, everybody in your family, everybody can see what you write. And on Instagram, it's not necessarily that way. So maybe people feel that it's a little more private and a little bit less visible to maybe some people they don't want to see what they're writing. And so they feel more open and honest about communicating. And I've just cried through Instagram sometimes through my feed, because people are just, mothers who've lost children, husbands who've lost wives. I mean, the suicide, it's just, it's a very cathartic, I guess, and healing avenue. And so, yeah, I think people do feel comfortable on Instagram. And I felt comfortable, talking more about my stuff there too.
But it takes place, and I think you make a really interesting point, because we look at Instagram for spreading awareness of the Musicto Grieve 2 list, and we post a track, and that track might have a particular angle, so we'll look at certain hashtags. So I'm looking at Instagram quite a bit, as a lot of our curators are, and the action takes place in the comments. And I think maybe that ties back into what you're talking about. On Facebook, everybody knows you and sees you. Whereas if you're out on Instagram and you find an image from somebody that you've never met before or just following loosely, and it resonates and you comment, nobody is going to see that apart from the person who posted the image, who clearly gets what you're talking about because you resonated with the image. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think the other place where people have found great safety and solace is in some of the Facebook groups that are out there. There's a lot of Facebook groups. You can find a Facebook group pretty much for any kind of loss. And I think in those, I don't want to say protected, because some of them are still a little bit open and you can see where people are posting. But I think in those groups, you find your tribe. And I think that's the important thing, is to be able to find people who not only can resonate with what you're saying, but actually have empathy and sympathy for what you're going, because, the social media world is a difficult world to exist in. And, it just takes a few trolls or just one troll with some nasty words that really can send you into a tailspin. So finding those safe and protected places where you feel comfortable talking about your loss in the social media land, I think, is very important and can be very healing as well.
I mean, Instagram, I've not seen much trolling of people, certainly in the grief world, on Instagram. I mean, sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There you go.
I've seen angry people and people who are still going through their grief and very angry,
Right.
which is okay. And I tend to talk to them offline, not with everybody else in the comments. But you're absolutely right. I think there isn't as much of that kind of trolling stuff, at least in my little world, because I don't have millions and millions of followers. But yeah, in my little world, it's a much safer place, I'm sure, with you.
That's the majority of people. And again, it's one of those, I mean, the whole point in my head of us having these conversations is that you and I spend a lot of time in the grief world compared to most people. I mean, it's your profession. I'm, have been working in this space, developing this market for a good couple of years now. So the whole point in us, speaking or pushing this information out is ultimately to, create something that somebody in the grieving world is going to connect with, resonate with, or maybe take something positive away from. And one of the things that I think has come really clear is that if you are grieving, Instagram isn't actually an amazing place to go and connect with people in a really safe way that doesn't expose you to your immediate network. Which, if you think about it, that's actually a really good takeaway, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because I think people, yearn for ways to talk about it. And sometimes, you can't do that with friends and family because you don't want to be judged, analyzed, or criticized. So knowing that there's a space where you can go and actually talk about how you're feeling instead of holding it inside, that's one of the healthiest things that you can do is really talk about it. And then the bigger thing is, I guess, seeing that you're not alone. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway too, is that there's a comfort, unfortunately, in knowing that you're part of a club, which is sad, but it also feels, you feel less crazy and less alone when hey, that person just said something that I'm feeling, okay, great. I don't feel like I'm alone or something's wrong with me. I'm just grieving, thank you. It makes a big difference.
Huge. And to add to that, we got to start seeing social media as tools rather than, because you made the comment earlier, that your experience of Instagram, there are less trolls because you don't have millions of followers. And there's this underlying thing that you get on Instagram or Facebook. And sure, you and I are in business, so we want to get as wide a network as possible. But if I've just been widowed, I don't want 1,000 followers. I don't want to. That's not what I'm there for. And we also know there's the transient nature of grief. So you don't want to build an entire, social profile around the fact that you're grieving, because that's going to be kind of tough when you want to move on. But if you go to an Instagram, and use that as a tool, as a technique to help you get through the shit that you're dealing with, that, and so the chase for followers or whatever, but to go in there and search a couple of hashtags. If you're dealing with pet loss, just stick that in and you'll be astonished what you can find. That to me, if there's one takeaway from this session, I think that would be it. And we'll probably retitle this, why Instagram is a great tool to help you manage grief. That'd be awesome.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, having that opportunity, the problem is in some ways is the demographic on Instagram is, definitely a younger crowd. But I find, I'm not in the younger crowd. I'm finding more and more people are using Instagram. And I think that's important, because it's a useful tool for everybody. You don't have to be 25 and posting selfies. I mean, just describing how you're feeling, just, being educated through a lot of the small businesses that are talking about grief. That's for any age group, right? It's not just for a particular demographic.
I think it's age is important, but you're right. In the grief world, it's more, category of grief, whether you're, a widowed father, a widowed mother, or you've lost a pet, or, your job's gone, or whatever. I mean, you search those categories and as you say, you find that whole tribe who are, that you don't have to be friends with. Because what I see is, somebody posts a super resonant image, and you'll go into the comment stream, and you'll see somebody just bleh, they write out their experience, and it's that cathartic thing, and then you never hear of them again.
Right.
But that was exactly what was required for them at that time, and it's pretty minimal risk, isn't it?
Right, and you've said that perfectly. I mean, you don't have to even say anything, right? You can just go in and read the comments, and something somebody says resonates with you, and for that day you feel better. You actually feel better. So that's why I think grief anniversaries is such an important thing to talk about, because people can go in and there is a hashtag, I think, grief anniversaries or angelversaries or whatever you want to call it, where people have gone through that day and talked about it, and maybe might say something that resonates with you on the day that you're going through a grief anniversary yourself.
That's brilliant, and I hadn't thought about that. And I think today, at some point, I'm going to take myself off, and I'm just going to go open Instagram on my personal account, and I'm going to go and search #grief anniversary, and then I'm just going to read a couple of things and see some images, and if one resonates, I'll maybe share my story on somebody's thing. That'll help. But so what's the music? Well, so the music this week is clearly my dad's theme. So as I think I've told you, I mean, this whole thing started with music to grieve to, and I couldn't write or compose after my dad died for a good 3 months, and there was a song. The first song that came out was him. My mum had got this. He died on the golf course. Was a big golfer, and so we had a local artisan make a really solid wooden bench out of the local Scottish wood, and it's this beautiful thing, and it sits on the hole, where he died. And it's cool. So this track was called The Bench. I mean, recently it got changed to, Loss, and he was a huge, fan of Beethoven. So it's taking like the opening notes of the Midnight Sonata, but, not twisting it, but turning it even more melancholic and downward. And it flows like that. And I hadn't heard it for a while. And it's one just to sit there and be sad, and I'm very glad it exists, because it's a really good way to connect to him. So that
tribute.
Yeah, that's the track for this week. So I think, if it's okay with you, I'm going to call it a day, because I'm a little kind of filthy here. But, I mean, I think the takeaway from this, because we never, by the way, plan this when we go into it. Sharon and I might have a topic, and then we're just, talking, because we spend a lot of time in this space. But if you've got a grief anniversary, get into Instagram, go and search the #, grief anniversary, or that hashtag around what you've lost, and see what you find. And maybe go to Music to Grieve to. Go to Musicto. The link to the track will be up in the next 20 minutes. And check out The Bench, because that's my dad. All right. Sharon, I will see you next week, and have a fabulous week.
Thank you for sharing.
All right.